2 successful pool dives with a BLU3 Nomad. I was ready to test it out in some real world conditions. The water was 53 degrees Fahrenheit, chilly and murky, but I was eager to see how it performed. My first concerns with this device was the battery life. I tend to breathe heavily, think of a dragon huffing and puffing, and I was worried I'd drain that battery quick. But to my surprise, the battery held up beautifully. Even with my breathing, it barely made a dent, giving me a lot more confidence in future dives. The floating hose worked great. It stayed out of the way. I didn't feel the device trailing behind me at all. That said, I wouldn't recommend the Nomad without flippers. They're essential for smooth movement. One thing to note, the regulator will free flow if you turned it face up in the water, but that's just something to watch out for. That's nothing new. The stability was another thing I noticed. It's not super stable in the water, but the air intake sits high enough to, handle minor waves. The training did emphasize using it in calm conditions, and I totally agree with this. Luckily, the dry bag really helps with the stability, and I was real impressed on how smooth of a setup it is with the dry bag. Around mid-dive, I was able to check the battery. It was really tricky since the device is floating. It takes some effort to press that button. With more practice, I'm sure I'll be able to get the hang of it and just dive up, check the battery, dive back down. This isn't the most stealthy device. The compressor only runs when you inhale, so it's not a constant hum you're able to tune out. It's noticeable. That said, underwater, 30 feet away, when you exhale bubbles, they are much louder than the compressor running in the background. Here's a quick clip and audio of the noise it makes above and below water. Drying the Nomad after a dive, that's a project in and of itself. I only brought one towel. That was a noob move. It wasn't even close to enough to dry me and the device off. This thing traps water in every nook and cranny, especially around the battery connector. The battery connector does have a dust cap, but only on the battery, not on the device itself. I would definitely bring 2 towels just for the Nomad so you could dry it down properly. I don't even want to know what it looks like if it's covered in sand. Now let's talk about the storage. The included backpack is fantastic. It fits everything perfectly. It's ideal for air travel, I think, or in a tight situation. That being said, for everyday use, I have found a large grocery tote to be much more practical. It easily accommodates a 40-foot hose and all of the accessories without having to go through the hassle of winding the hose up around the device and perfectly fitting all of the accessories in each individual spot. For getting in and out of the water, unraveling that hose off of the device is tricky because the hose comes out the bottom of the device. Also, the spout, the air intake is pretty tall, so it's not like you can just uncord it, take out the core of it, and just use it. That's why I would say if you're not traveling, just keep the hose unraveled from the device itself. It's my first voiceover I've done on YouTube. Everything else on this channel has just been music and sounds. I really appreciate you putting up with my ums, pauses, and heavy breathing.